Greg Drevenstedt, editor-in-chief at Rider Magazine, and your host for the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast. Our guest today is Stephen Goode. We talked to Stephen back in 2021 on episode 27 of the podcast about the Great American Deli Schlep. Stephen rode his Honda Goldwing 15,000 miles in 75 days and visited the best Jewish deli in nearly every state. And he raised funds for Maison, a nonprofit organization that fights hunger. Prior to his deli tour, Stephen rode 14,000 miles to the four corners of the United States, 12,000 miles to visit each of the lower 48 states, and 17,000 miles to visit every national park in America. Stephen is at it again. On May 9th, he will embark on the Great American Scenic Byway Tour. He'll ride the best scenic byway in each of the lower 48 states, and he's raising funds and awareness for the Parkinson's Foundation. Every 6 minutes, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, a group of motor system disorders that are chronic and progressive. The Parkinson's Foundation's mission is to improve care and advance research towards a cure. I encourage listeners to click on the links on the podcast webpage to make a donation to support Stephen's efforts. And you can get daily updates about the Great American Scenic Byway Tour on Facebook. Climb is providing apparel, and Nelson Rigg is providing luggage for this tour. Thanks for listening, and keep the rubber side down. Hey, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hi, Greg. How are you?
Doing great. Well, I should also say welcome back to the show. You and I did an interview on episode 27, and so we're now in the upper 50s or low 60s. I don't know what the number is for this episode in particular, but that was back in 2021, I believe, because that was the year that you did the Great American Deli Schlep, where you rode around the country for 75 days and visited the best Jewish deli in nearly every state. And that was a fundraising ride you did for an organization called Maison. And then you've got a new ride coming up. This is going to be called the Great American Scenic Byway Tour, and this will benefit the Parkinson's Foundation. So one of the things I just kind of, before we get into your new ride, I kind of want to give readers a little bit of background, because you're definitely somebody who likes to put miles on a motorcycle. You've done a Four Corners tour of the United States. That was, what was that? 14,000 miles, 11,000 miles. You visited all of the lower 48 states on a different ride. You visited every national park in the United States,
right.
Even ones like the Channel Islands and Dry Tortugas, and a different ride. So what is it about going on these long rides? You're typically solo. What drives you to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I was always doing like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 mile rides, when I was working. And then when I retired, I said, okay, I looked at the Four Corners, said, boy, that's intriguing. Maybe I can get that done. And I did it in 2013 and really enjoyed myself. I mean, it was just sort of like, let's see the entire country. And then the follow-up to that was the 48 states. And that was a little bit over 11,000 miles, because I didn't have to go as deep into the Four Corners as I had to. So, that cut a few miles off. And then I just, took a little bit of breather, and then got back into it. I said, I miss it. I really enjoyed planning. My spreadsheet, I think, is now up to about 110 lines.
Wow.
And for this upcoming trip. And I enjoy the planning component. And then I love just being on the road and meeting people and seeing the country that most of us have never seen before, especially the back roads.
Right. Well, the Great American Deli Schlep that we mentioned, which was also, there was a feature that you wrote about that. Really one of my favorite features that's been in Rider in recent years, because that was, again, it was 2021. So it was still sort of late in the, it was the pandemic that, but it was still the sort of thing. People were having masks and vaccinations, but it was still not as maybe returned to normal as we are now. But you found this list of the, best Jewish deli in every state, but most Jewish delis are in cities. And you're talking about riding in back roads. But I remember in your story, but also our last interview on episode 27, you're saying one of the challenges was, hey, connecting the dots between these Jewish delis was great, because I could be on the back roads, I could go to see some scenic areas, but then you had to basically drive and ride into Los Angeles or Chicago or Atlanta, and that was the kind of nerve-wracking part of it, because that's where a lot of these delis were.
Oh yeah, it was. You're absolutely right. For 90% of the ride, I was on these beautiful back roads and just real sort of relaxing. Then once I got to within 50, 60 miles of the major city, I took it off of, you know, avoid highways, and I just blasted into the city on the highway generally, got to the deli. And what was amazing is that, getting in and out of the cities wasn't that complicated. New York freaked me out, but, but, Chicago's fine because I live here in Chicago. So I knew all the highways and all of that. But New York really sort of like scared me a little bit because I'm thinking,
Sure.
okay, I'm going to get lost. I don't know where I'm going. As soon as I got within 10 miles, everybody was going like 5 miles an hour.
Right.
So, so my GPS had plenty of time to reconfigure the route if I got off route. So it wasn't as scary as I thought. And it was a great 42 delis and, a wonderful 15,000-mile ride, and made a lot of nice friends along the way.
Well, and one of the things I love about that story is you've got so many fantastic photos. You had this this banner that had your route, and it had sort of details about, and that you would take it and people would sign it. But you have these great photos of you out front of the deli, maybe with your bike, but with people that worked at the deli or owned the deli, and the backstories of some of these people. Some of them were multi-generational families that have owned these delis for over 100 years. And so that was, I thought, it was a really special part of your story. But also there were members of is it the Jewish Motorcycle Alliance that you're a member of?
Right. It's called the JMA, the Jewish Motorcycle Alliance. We have, I don't know, 25, 28 chapters around the country, and in Toronto, and in England, and in Israel. I think there might be one in Australia. So we've got an event coming up where we do a Holocaust remembrance ride. We raise money for Holocaust education, which is wonderful. It's a great group, and some of the guys want to meet me along the way.
Right.
So
right.
I'm going to be connecting with those guys, probably 3 or 4 of them along the way. We've got a Phoenix chapter and a whole bunch of chapters out east.
Right.
So it's going to be fun.
Well, I know some of your fellow JMA members, joined you on some of the deli schleps. So let's talk about this new one. So actually, last time we talked, I think you had said that, hey, I think this might be one of my last long trips. I've kind of like done a lot of these, and you're like, I think maybe I'm going to maybe turn my attention to something else. And of course, I wasn't surprised when you had reached out to me. Like, hey, I came up with a new one. And because again, there was the 4 corners, there was each of the lower 48 states, there was every national park. I mean, I really like the idea that you've got kind of a hook, not just for a story, but just like, hey, here's a theme or a way for me to put together a cool route. You've got the time, you've got the inclination. Like you said, now that you're retired, you can spend more time on the road. I don't know how long you're going to be on your upcoming trip, but so now you're going to visit or ride. I don't know if it's the best or one of the best scenic byways in each of the lower 48 states. So tell us a little bit about how this one came about.
Okay, so I came up with an idea to ride the loneliest road in every state. And I approached a friend of mine. He goes, I'd love to do that ride or do a ride like that, but that doesn't entice me. So I sat back and I thought about it. I said, well, maybe the most scenic byway. And I saw some article about the most scenic byway in every state. Well, that's it. That's the ride. Wow. And my buddy, this guy, Bruce Granger, calls me up and says, you know what? Check out this book. National Geographic has a book on the scenic byways, a guide to the scenic byways in every state, which I did. And that became my source of where to go and where to do the research, because it was a condensed version. It's like 400 or 500 pages long, but it gives you great detail on every scenic byway. So I was able to start with a map of the United States, and then I researched each state, because the national parks book has 5, 6, 7 different scenic byways in every state. So I'm not obviously going to hit every one of those.
Right.
And I decided to pick those that I had not been to or that I really wanted to see again.
Okay.
And I started putting pins in the map, and then I started connecting the dots. And then I started with the spreadsheet.
Well, can you give us some examples of some states and some of the byways? Are they some of the better known ones?
Absolutely. The Cherahalla in Tennessee is one.
Nice.
Outer Banks in North Carolina. The High Road to Taos in New Mexico. Route 12 in Utah.
Oh, fantastic road.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Going to the Sun Highway
Ah,
in Montana, Beartooth Pass in Wyoming.
awesome.
So
Yeah.
these are all on my to-do list
Right.
coming up on this trip. It's gonna be great. And I've been on a couple of those, most of them, but
Yeah.
you know, you can't get enough of a great road.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for example, I live in Southern California, and one of my favorite roads, which unfortunately is closed right now, or portions of it, so is the Pacific Coast Highway that runs between San Simeon and and
Oh
Carmel that
yeah,
goes through Big Sur. That's obviously a very famous road. We've had these very heavy rains this season, and there's some rock slides that have yet to be repaired, and that is a road that is constantly under construction because of slides, because it's such a severe mountain. But is
right.
I've ridden that road up and down it, several dozen times, and I still don't get bored of it. So something like the Beartooth Highway, which I've never ridden, and going to the Sun
Oh,
Road, which I've never ridden, they're just, I mean, to be able to ride them once is a bucket list experience for a lot of people, but to be able to go back and be like, oh, I remember how awesome this is, and just experience it all over again, that's great. That's awesome.
yeah. I'll be on Route One in Oregon. That's
Okay.
the one in Oregon. So it's going to be Route One in Oregon. I love that. I mean, Route One in Oregon is just gorgeous.
So what's the scenic byway in California that you selected?
Well, I'm going to go through Death Valley.
Oh,
Believe it or
beautiful.
not, that's beautiful. I mean, if people have never been to Death Valley National Park, it's a sleeper. It's 1,000 miles of roadway.
Yeah.
Most of it's not paved,
Right.
but it is absolutely stunning. And then I'll end up in Sequoia National Park, Kings Canyon.
Nice.
Um, Kings Canyon, another sleeper of a
Beautiful.
road that most people have never been down, and it's just spectacular. And then I'll start heading north towards Oregon,
Nice.
and I'll ride through Crater Lake and Lassen National Park and
Oh,
those areas.
beautiful. Oh
Yeah,
man, some of these are going to be
yeah,
fantastic. Well, it'll be interesting. I'll
that'd
be
be fun.
curious about some of their timing, because some of these places, because of how much snow we've had in California, some of the passes are going to be probably closed later than they would, in terms of seasonal closures and things like that.
I'm
So
concerned.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I just want a little aside. I just was rode through Death Valley in February, and it was one of those experiences that I will not forget. I wrote about it in the May issue of the magazine, and even included a link to a little video. I got caught in a couple of sandstorms, basically, where 60-mile-an-hour winds, and
Whoa.
the bike I was on was, I was very lucky to just kind of keep it on the road, even though I was riding it very slow. And it was such high velocity winds that it kind of sandblasted the bike. I mean, my face shield was pitted, the windscreen on the bike, some of the paint. I mean, it just
Oh
was,
my.
it was really intense. And but that was just part of the experience. Is in some of these Western states, particularly Death Valley, it's known for its heat, but I was there and it was in the 30s, and it had 60-mile-an-hour winds, and all the beautiful scenery of the mountains was obscured by this, basically
Oh,
everything was the dust clouds. But I made it through okay. Like I said, the bike didn't fare as well, but yeah, one of my absolute favorite places to ride, California Highway 190, that runs through the entire
nice.
park. And there are other paved roads, but that's kind of the main one. Yeah, it's stunning, because you can have snow-capped mountains and be near, and you can see snow-capped mountains that are 11, 12,000 feet, and be 100, 200 feet below sea level there in Furnace Creek. So yeah.
Right at Badwater Junction or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
exactly. So you're going to be leaving on May 9th. Do you have an idea about how long you're going to be on the road?
That's interesting because I went back to my other 4 trips and I took the total mileage, divided it by the number of days I was out on the road.
Yeah.
2 of the trips came in at exactly 258 miles. And the other 2 trips came in at like 254 and
Hmm.
260. So, by the time all is said and done with stops and with getting oil changes or new
Right.
tires, whatever, you're going to average about 250 to 260 miles per day. So this is going to clock in at probably around 60 days, plus or minus.
Okay. So
This is
about
what
two,
I'm factoring.
yeah, about
Maybe
2 months on
maybe
the
a
road.
little less.
So what sort of, I mean, you're going to hit 48 states. And so obviously you've got to work out a route. You're starting at your home in Chicago. Are you heading east first? Are you heading west first? Or where are you going?
Okay. So my first stop is southern Indiana. I'm going to pick up the Ohio River and follow that east into Kentucky and West Virginia and whatnot, and then start making my way south to the Gulf.
Okay.
And Louisiana, that whole area, and then basically travel east along the Gulf through Alabama and Florida, etc.
Right.
And then once I hit the Atlantic coast, start my trip up the coast towards Maine.
Nice.
Once I touch all of those states, I'm going to cross over through Canada because it's the most direct route to Michigan, and cross over at Sault Ste. Marie.
Nice.
And then drop into Sault Ste. Marie, get to Copper Harbor, Duluth area, Minneapolis area, and then drop south and start heading west. And
Nice.
then it's just sort of like ping ponging from state to state at that point.
Right.
And what I did, just for other people who are thinking about doing this type of a trip, the best thing to do is to, go to AAA or whatever and get a map of the United States and start putting dots in the map. And then you can visually understand how to connect those dots.
Right.
And once you start connecting those dots, you then have a basis for a plan.
Nice.
Then you can drop that into a spreadsheet.
Right.
With mileage and everything else.
Well, and this isn't like an iron butt rally sort of thing. You're not on the clock, so you want to have maybe an efficient route, just in terms of, so you're not crisscrossing, wasting time or something like that. But you're gonna just move along at a pace that you're enjoyable, and be able to make stops and visit friends and see different places. So you're not necessarily in a rush. You just want to make sure you've got a lot of ground to cover.
Right. I mean, my routine is, for the last 4 of them, you get up at about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Shower, shave, eat breakfast at the hotel. I don't camp. I tried that, but at my age, I'm 68. I'm like, okay, I'm done. Unless the tent has grab handles, I'm not doing it.
Right.
So I shave, shower, whatever, grab breakfast, and then head out. So once I'm packed up, I'm usually on the road by 8 o'clock.
Right.
8:15, and then I'll ride until about 5:30 or so. About 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'll pull over, get a Wi-Fi signal, and go on to my an app to book my hotel, 100 miles down the road. So now that I know that I'm within striking distance and I know what the weather's like, I don't have that risk of a flat tire. You could always have a flat tire in the last 100 miles.
Right.
But at least maybe you could limp into the town that you choose.
Right.
And that there's hotels available in that town, and the national sewing bee's not going on, where every hotel room is taken within 100 miles.
So that makes sense. So you don't necessarily have, hotels booked along the way. So you're not locked into a schedule if you have some weather challenges, some mechanical issues, or whatever it may be. So you have a general direction, but that makes sense. You basically can make your hotel reservation that day, and it allows you some flexibility. You're not locked into something like, if I don't cancel by 24 hours in advance, I'm going to lose the money or something. So yeah.
Right. And it also avoids rolling into a town, like I said, and finding out every room's booked.
Right.
So if I go online and I find that every room is booked in that town, and I start asking questions, and realize there's not a hotel because there's some major convention going on, I might stay where I'm at.
Right.
Or I might go to a different route.
Right.
Or I might go to a different town.
Right.
And it's all about flexibility. It's all about, I have a little sign in my office that says it's all about Plan B.
Oh, yeah.
And that happened to me. I was heading towards Houston on my Delhi trip, and I'm going down Interstate 10, and there's a black clouds ahead, and I figure Houston's another 100 miles, no big deal. Well, the storm that hit was so intense. The trucks had their four-way flashers on. They're all going 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. And I'm pushing water off my front tire like crazy. And I'm saying, this is not safe.
Right.
And I just sort of bailed at the first exit and got a hotel room.
Smart.
Yeah. It's all about plan B.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. Like I said, you're not locked into any specific thing, and I know you've had some challenges with weather. I mean, I remember one of the stories about, you talked about some of the rain that you've dealt with. There was the one, maybe it was you were on the New Jersey Turnpike when that tire or wheel went rolling down the road and you were wondering what was going to happen, and you realized it had clipped your saddlebag after the fact. Yeah.
Right. That was a beautiful sunny day. I mean, that was a day. It was gorgeous. I was 75 degrees sunny. I'm traveling along and I see a tire in about 100 yards in front of me rolling in the same direction I'm traveling, and it's in my lane. And I sort of back off the throttle and I watch this tire go off into the emergency lane, and then it ends up in the weeds, and it must have hit a lake or a pond or something. And I see this splash of water. I said, "Oh, I'm done. Okay, it's now in the water, right?" So I do a little head check to the right as I pass, and I come back. I mean, only a quarter of a second. I come back, and that tire is coming perpendicular across the highway, like 20 yards in front of me. And I'm doing 60 miles an hour.
Right.
And I don't know how I missed it, but I thank God I did, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing this interview.
Yeah, no, I understand. I remember you told me that was one of those close calls. You're like, well, yeah, it wasn't my time. So yeah, it was,
Right.
You made it through. So, well, I know that with your deli slip tour that it wasn't just something to, hey, this is a cool thing I want to go do, which it was on one level, but you're like, hey, I can use this as an opportunity to raise some awareness and raise some funds. And you did that for an organization called Maison, which is a nonprofit organization that fights hunger. So this Great American Scenic Byway Tour, you're raising funds and awareness for the Parkinson's Foundation. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, their website's parkinsons.org. They're a national organization. My mother passed away from Parkinson's, so it's, dear and close to my heart as far as, raising money and awareness. And I said, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it for a non-for-profit that means something to me. So I reached out to them, and they were all in. They've been great. So they've helped me with all the social media and the website creation, everything else. And then I started to, reach out to others. I reached out and, to motorcycle related companies in the industry. I got Climb as a sponsor.
Great.
They were very kind to sponsor this ride. They provided a Latitude motorcycle suit for this ride. And they want me to sort of critique it and tell them what's good and what's bad. And so far I put about 400 or 500 miles on it, and it's been terrific so far. And then Nelson Riggs stepped up and provided me some waterproof luggage, which my guess is I'll probably put it to the test on this ride.
Absolutely. I'm
always in rain.
Well, that's great. I mean, Climb and Nelson Rig both make really good gear, and that they want to support your efforts. That's great. And also, there are companies that they're like, hey, we want to have, durability testing. They do a lot of their own stuff, but having somebody like you ride cross country for 2 months straight, that'll definitely give them, you can give them some good feedback on what works and what doesn't. So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been great. It's been a great partnership. And, hopefully we can get the word out and, raise some money for them, and just so that people understand it. I've got friends who've got Parkinson's, and, it's just it's a rough disease.
Yeah.
And, a lot of, every 6 minutes, somebody new in the United States gets diagnosed with Parkinson's. And so there's unfortunately plenty of people who are wrestling with it.
Right. Well, yes, it is. And that's one of the things that I really respect about what you do, and what, really the motorcycling community. I've interviewed a number of people on the podcast that there was a gentleman named Tim Card I interviewed recently who was riding cross country. He was the visionary of the year for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. He's a cancer survivor. There's organizations like the Ride for Kids, which is for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. is the motorcycling community has a big heart, and they donate a lot. They participate a lot in charitable activities and rides and toy runs and things. And I think that's great, because I still to this day, it's kind of, maybe it's not surprising to some people, but I think motorcycles and motorcyclists still kind of get a bad rap, still have kind of an image of being bad or reckless or something, or dangerous or something like that. But motorcyclists are just people too, and they use the opportunity of their sense of community, brotherhood, sisterhood, to come together and raise money for causes and raise awareness. So just like what you're doing.
Absolutely. And one of the things I would stress in this podcast is that if somebody has a desire to do some long distance touring or riding, if they have a little bit of desire and organizational skills, and to reach out to the charity of their choice, because it's a great partnership. I mean, the organization loved it. When I went to Parkinson's and I pitched it, they were like, this is fantastic, because everybody loves a cowboy,
Great,
and they
great.
and especially when you're riding and you're solo and you're out there doing these long distances, it's very enticing. And so if somebody out there wants to test it out, I would strongly encourage it. It's a lot of fun. You meet a lot of great people, and you're doing some really good things, whether it be for Parkinson's or for hunger or for whatever. So I'd have to encourage your listeners to hopefully think about doing something along those lines.
Well, we will certainly have links to podcast webpage in the show notes. You're going to have a Facebook page, but you've got a fundraising page with Parkinsons.org. And I would encourage folks, hey, every dollar helps, every dollar counts. Just chip in a few bucks if you've got it, more if if you're inclined to support what Steve's doing, to support the Parkinson's Foundation. But also, is it your Facebook page that people can kind of follow your along with your trip?
You were reading my mind. Yeah, we decided to post it on Facebook. So they developed a Facebook page, and I'm not a real technical person. So what I'm going to be doing, what we decided is we're going to be using Google Share, I think it's called, or something along those lines, a Google program where I can upload pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write a blog, and then they are going to, behind the scenes, place it onto Facebook.
Great.
And update it so that people can follow along. And that's the whole idea. One of my goals was, because there's so many people that don't get out the opportunities to ride these roads, or to be on a motor, they'll never be on a motorcycle, some of them, but to ride these roads and to experience some of these beautiful scenic byways that are offered up in every state, like my national parks trip, and write about those so that people can feel like they're riding along with me on these rides. So hopefully my writings will not be, I rode from point A to point B.
Right.
It will be more of what the experience is like in these areas, so that they feel the rain or the heat, or the where the heck am I type of a feeling, and how am I going to get out of here?
Well, it's the road warrior experience. It's sort of like, reading articles about people that climb Mount Everest. It's like, that's not something I ever personally want to do, but just the personal adversity and challenge that people have to go through, and that's what you'll be dealing with, because some of it is just the pure joy and glory of being able to ride some of these roads, but you will encounter some heat, some rain, some cold. Like I said, you may have some roads that are still got some snow along the side of the roads, and there might be some closures and things, and you can't predict in advance what's going to happen. And that's part of the excitement and challenge of doing a trip like this.
Oh, absolutely. And I hope through my writings, people can pick up on that and really get a feel for what it's like to try to plan and execute a trip of this nature. And which brings me back to something I want to mention is a lot of people say, well, why did you pick this time to leave? Why don't you pick closer into the summer or whatever? And one of the things I mentioned when I did these national trips is you needed to try to figure out how to avoid the tornadoes in the Midwest, which are springtime. Starting June 1st, the hurricanes in Florida.
Right.
the heat in Arizona. So how do you balance all of that? Because if you leave a little later or whatever, you're going to hit those hurricanes in Florida. If you leave too early, you're going to hit those tornadoes in the Midwest.
Right.
You're certainly going to hit, record heat in the West
Right.
if you decide to leave too late. So it's a balancing act. And like you just said, I'm probably going to hit some snow up in, Beartooth and or Glacier.
Right.
I just hope they're open.
Right. Right.
Honestly.
Well, I mean, I know that you've, like I said, you've built some flexibility into your schedule, and you're not on a rigid sort of route or timeline. So that I imagine if you do have to do some routing around, or I mean, maybe you have a plan B scenic byway in a state, because a state like Wyoming or a state like Montana certainly has more than one. The state like Idaho's got, coo-doodles of, boo-koodles. That's what my grandmother used to say. Boo-koodles. She's like, you have a whole bunch of scenic byways. Is that, yeah, if you're like, hey, Beartooth Highway is the marquee one. That's the one everybody knows about, but it's also at a certain elevation that if you had to go a different route, I'm sure you could, so.
Yeah, I just looked it up, 10,984 feet.
Yeah.
I'm routing a friend to Beartooth Pass. He's driving a car out to Seattle. And he asked me, he goes, what should I see? I said, well, let's start with Beartooth Pass.
Yeah.
Let's go to Yellowstone.
Yeah.
Let's go to Lola Pass.
Oh, yeah.
So
for what about Colorado? That's of course known for high passes. Is the Scenic Byway, or what are you doing, the $1 Million Highway, or you?
I've done the $1 Million Highway a bunch of times.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know if I've been up to Pikes Peak on the tram.
Okay.
Or with my son when he was younger.
Right.
I think I'm going to try to ride that.
Okay.
I hope that it's open.
Yeah, well, yeah, that could be. Yeah, I know there's between Pikes Peak and then the other one is Mount Evans that goes up just a little bit higher than Pikes Peak. But those roads are, you can top out over 14,000 feet on those roads. So yeah, I don't know what the snow pack is like in those parts of the Rockies, but yeah, that's, I guess, will be part of the challenge. Is like, well, Mother Nature has her plans and you've got yours, and she's got the ace of spades. So
yeah, exactly. What's the old saying? Man plans and God laughs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I can plan all I want, but depending upon what the weather's going to be like,
right,
it could very well be to plan B.
So for your deli schlep tour, you rode a Honda Goldwing Tour. And is that the same bike you'll be using for this trip?
It is. And I just got the 40,000 mile service done at my home dealership, DSP Honda, DSP Power Motorsports. And I did the 40,000 miles, put on some new tires.
Nice.
And ready to go. And,
awesome.
Somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to, because it's 15,000 miles, somewhere along the line, I'm going to have to pull into another dealership and get some service done.
Right.
But, again, that will be, as it comes along.
Well, I certainly encourage people to follow along on Facebook. You can check in on a daily basis. Again, your planned departure date is May 9th. So from May 9th for the next 60 days or so, you'll be having near daily updates and blog posts and things like that. As you did with your national park tour as well as your deli schlep tour, I certainly hope you'll consider contributing a story and some photos to be able to publish in Rider, because like I said, you do capture what it's like to the experience of your trip. And we all want to live vicariously through that, because it's, like I said earlier, riding one of these scenic byways can be a bucket list thing, like Beartooth Highway. For some people, you're going to do 48 of them in one trip. And to be able to do all of that in one big trip is something that not a lot of people either have the time, the money, the inclination, the stars in alignment, whatever it may be. So yeah, we're pulling for you.
Oh, well, thank you. And, like I said earlier, the goal is that when you're reading my blog, you're sitting on the back seat, on the pillion seat with me.
Awesome.
And experiencing it as I do. That would be the goal.
So again, this will be a solo trip, but will you said some of your buddies from the JMA might tag along here and there, or is it mostly going to be solo?
Yeah, it's going to be mostly solo. I really would love to get, groups for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And let them ride the areas and experience it a little bit. So my guess is right now I've got like 2, 3 people who've said, "Hey, I want to hook up."
Okay.
No, and that's provides its own little sets of criteria because I'm having a conversation with one guy and he goes, "Okay, I see that you're going to be in this town. Are you going to be there in the evening or are you coming in the morning?"
Right.
I'm like, "That's 3 weeks into my trip." I
Yeah.
said, "I don't even know if I'm going to make it
Right.
there
Right.
on
Right.
that date, because a flat tire or engine problems or weather, you know, I said, we're going to have to, talk via cell phone or whatever every couple of days prior to getting there because there's just no way I can pinpoint it,"
Right.
which was really, in thinking back about the Delhi trip, was amazing because I had specific dates and times that I had to be at each deli,
Right.
42 of them. And I was able to make each one, which was, in retrospect, just sort of blows my mind because you're talking about a national tour
Yeah.
and going, okay, on Tuesday, I got to be in Denver at 11:30 at this location.
Right. Right.
And on Thursday, I've got to be in New Mexico at this location.
And you
And
had
I was
some
able,
media interviews at some of those delis and stuff. So yeah, you had a lot riding on making
right.
that. So I'm sure that added I think we talked about that. That was an extra level of pressure or sort of,
Correct.
maybe a little bit of stress to make sure, hey, these people are counting on me because there were some people that were promoting your arrival at these delis and wanted to come meet you and show up and sort of support what you were doing. So,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is gonna be a laid back trip.
Well, I will follow your. I'm not that close to Death Valley. I'm about 4 or 5 hours away, but I will follow your progress. And if I see it's something that I've got some room in my schedule and I can hop on a bike and head up your way, I'd love to just meet you in person and shake your hand. You and I have had a couple of podcast interviews. We've talked on the phone. We've exchanged lots of emails, and yeah. So if we can get together and shake hands and have a cup of coffee or something, that would be
Oh,
fantastic.
that'd be fabulous.
Yeah.
I would really look forward to it.
So
Absolutely, that'd be great.
well, Stephen, again, I really, like I said earlier, I wasn't surprised when you reached out to me and said, "Hey, I cooked up this other idea," and it sounds very cool. I mean, to ride 48 different, hand-picked scenic byways in every state, because what makes not every scenic byway necessarily has got great curves or high elevation or something, but they're scenic for a reason. So you're seeing what is the best in a particular area. So it could be lakes and forests, it can be canyons or mountains or whatever, or it be pastoral land. I mean, you're going to get to enjoy a wide variety of places that are scenic byways, and then there's connecting them all together, which again you're mostly going to be doing back roads. So you're going to get to see some of America you've seen before, but a whole bunch I'm sure you've never seen before. And there's all these hidden gems that are just that'll I'm sure be the real reward of the trip. On a personal level, it's just like, wow, all these things that you can't anticipate what you will see or experience.
Yeah, it's the funniest thing is that I've been out on these rides a number of times, and you're in the middle of nowhere, and you roll into a town of 300 people, and you pull in, and you look around, and you look to the left, you look to the right, and you go, "Wait a second, I've been here before."
Yeah.
It's like it's at the corner of nowhere and nowhere,
Yeah.
and it's like, "Wait a second, I've been here before. I recognize that barn," and that's just part of the beauty of it.
Well, again, I'm super stoked for you. I'm envious.
Yeah.
I think I said I was envious of your deli trip also because I love Jewish deli food and what you're going to get to ride. So again, anybody who's listening, please, try to find one of the links on the podcast webpage or something like that. Chip in a few bucks to support what Steve's doing for the Parkinson's Foundation. And like I said, we're pulling for you, man. Keep
Thank
the
you.
rubber side down, ride safe, have fun, and we look forward to following your progress on Facebook. And like I said, hopefully getting a story into the magazine when you're all done.
Greg, thank you for everything that you and Ryder have done for me. Thank you very, very much. It's really
It's
been
our
a
absolute
pleasure
pleasure,
working with
Steve.
you.
Yeah, it's great. And for the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, I'm Greg Drevenstead. Thanks for listening. Keep the rubber side down. If you've enjoyed listening to the Rider Magazine Insider Podcast, please subscribe, leave us a positive rating, and tell your friends. We also encourage you to visit ridermagazine.com, where you can get the latest in motorcycle news and reviews and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You can also subscribe to print and digital editions of Rider Magazine, which is published 12 times a year. Thanks again for listening.